So it's a great pleasure and an honor for me to welcome General PK Singh here. For those of you who don't know him, he is the big boss of the United Services Institution. I won't bore you with details, but he's had a most distinguished career for 41 years in the Indian Army. He is someone who has bled olive green. He is very much a man of the uniform, and I am the son of an army officer, and I will say that my first loyalty to any organization in this country is always to the Indian Army and then to the Indian Defense Forces. And then, of course, I served in the Indian Police Service. That comes a distant second, because we simply don't put in the same work as the Defense Forces do for the sovereignty and security of this nation. Now, those of you who attend my world history classes are well aware of the importance of battles in history. In our country, we know that we have constantly suffered at the hands of invaders because we were neither organized nor technologically savvy. Those of you who have attended my course know of the three major battles we fought and the three major battles we lost in the recent past. Number one, when the Portuguese showed up in town, they burnt an Indian ship that was trading with the Middle East. Vasco da Gama did not just burn the men. He burnt the children first, even as women were offering their ornaments and begging for mercy. It was a statement. It was a signal. And the signal was that if you don't pay up, not only will you die, so will your children. Thereafter, Indians, instead of fighting back on the seas, started buying dastak. What is the dastak? Started buying the karta. What is the karta? The karta was a permit. It was a permit you purchased for the right to trade on the seas. And if you did not purchase it, you were liable to be attacked and sunk at sea. And of course, the Portuguese would burn the women, your women and children, just for fun. First battle, big battle. By the way, this happens before Panipat, which is the second battle I'm going to talk about. Battle of Panipat, 1526. Babur had a handful of men. The numerical superiority that the Indians had in every major battle was 1:10 or 1:9. What Babur did have was the use of muskets and cannons, and a technologically savvy way of fighting wherein he confined the front to a very narrow space. The Indian charge was always famous or infamous for its valor and stupidity. The Indians would charge, the muskets and the cannons would extract damage, and then the cavalry would attack from the flanks. Pandemonium would ensue. In the retreat, the numerically superior force would be slaughtered on one battlefield after another. Even the legendary Rana Sanga in Battle of Kanwa in 1527 suffered the same fate. In that battle, the Rajput charge had such a ferocity that it nearly overturned the central fortification or the central defense line of Babur. But at the critical moment, the charge softened. The tide turned. It led to the Mughal Empire, arguably a jolly good thing, arguably not. That's a separate issue. That's an issue for historians. But the reality is, a numerically insignificant force inflicted a catastrophic defeat. Number three, moving on to none other than Robert Clive of India, a Shropshire lad. Clive of India, a man who had tried to commit suicide by taking a pistol and trying to blow his brains out in Madras, now Chennai, thought it was a signal from God, rocked up in Bengal. Obviously, there was a bit of duplicity. Mir Jafar certainly didn't help. But even so, despite the betrayal, the fighting techniques of the young, rash Siraj-ud-Dawla were shambolic and idiotic. Again, another disgraceful defeat. 2 centuries of colonization, taxation, starvation, and an economy that had been the second largest in the world till 1822, an economy that was known for its craftsmen, an economy that produced great textiles, cotton, steel, and numerous other items and artifacts, was reduced to one of the poorest in the world, with a life expectancy that was the lowest in the world, with malnutrition rife, and a confidence that was beaten, if not broken. 3 battles, 3 outcomes, not terribly gallant or, shall we say, edifying in our recent past. Ultimately, a nation remains a nation if it can stand up and defend itself. Everywhere I go in Europe, and I spend a considerable amount of time passing through villages and towns in countries like France and England, you find war memorials. In every college, you have a plaque of men who've died in the 2 world wars. And there is a reason for the commemoration of the price people have paid in blood, because it is that price that enables others to live in safety and security, and ensures that the democracy you have and the liberties you can exercise remain unthreatened. I'm here to invite General PK Singh to talk about the defense strategies we need in the 21st century, because we are facing a time when the neighborhood we live in is turning rougher. Pakistan is turning to a greater degree of fundamentalism. Vociferous tendencies are threatening to pull Pakistan apart. China is resurgent after being quiescent for, let's say, the last 3 or 4 centuries. It now wants to be the top dog in the world. When you go to China, the world map has China in the center. They call themselves the Middle Kingdom because they are the middle of the known universe. Apart from China and Pakistan, we have continuing worries about, shall we say, the predominance of the US, which has never really been a terribly good friend. In 1971, the US intervened in favor of Pakistan because it wanted the Pakistanis to have the liberty to rape Bangladeshi women, whilst, of course, we were threatening world peace by liberating a besieged, beleaguered Bangladesh, then East Pakistan. So we have to navigate a planet in which there are many risks. We have a rough neighborhood to contend with, and we have a political structure that fails to look beyond the next election. And so, at a time when there are 66 million refugees, the highest number since World War II, I invite General PK Singh to take the floor. As the Germans would say, Herr General, the floor is yours.
Professor Jain, Director of the IIT Gandhinagar, Professor Atul Singh, Parv Patel, members of the SSS and the organizing committee, I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to be here at the IIT. For a student who dreaded physics and maths, it's a great honor to be here, to be talking to people at the IIT. So I would like to, right at the beginning, thank all of you who are here, present here, and of course the faculty and the director for inviting me. I would also like to take this opportunity to especially thank my colleague, Air Marshal Dheer, the CNC of the Southwestern Air Command, for honoring me by being here. It's a great honor, sir. Thank you for taking time off from a busy schedule to be here. As a former CNC, I salute you as being the CNC today. Thank you very much, sir, for being here. The topic of today's talk has been already enumerated by Atul. But before I go on to the talk, I would like to say it's great to see you all, the young generation, the bright generation, the future of our country over here. It always inspires people like me. It reminds me of my own days when, as a 15-year-old kid, I joined the National Defense Academy in January 1964 to begin my 4 years training. And the ripe age of 19, I became Lieutenant of the Indian Army in 1967. I mean, at that age, you could have, there was nothing which could have stopped us. We could have achieved anything. That Dil Mange More and you retake Kargil, we could have done the same. And the future generation will do the same. So that motivation, that josh, the passion for our country, for our armed forces is imbibed at that place. 4 years of training there, the friendship and the bonding that we do is great. So it reminds me of those days, and it's here. I come from an army background. My father was also commissioned in the army in 1943. So I grew up listening to stories of the Second World War, which he and his colleagues would talk. We were not allowed to sit there. We would sit somewhere else and listen to them. We heard about partition and the mayhem, because my father was in that formation which was created to protect what happened at the borders at the time of the independence and partition. And they failed. That's a failing because they were too few. And they had not anticipated, and I'll be talking about that a little later. I had also seen and heard about 62. I was still there with my father, and I must tell you a small little story. There was this class fellow of mine. We both were passionate about joining the army. But my ambition was to join the army through the National Defense Academy after becoming an officer. His passion was join the army, period. So in 62, he was 2.5 years older than me, a good wrestler, good sportsman, little better built. He said, hey, let's run away and join the army as sepoys. Let's go and join. And he had the vision, he understood. He says, war is coming. And none of us were talking about war is coming. And here was a kid of 16 and a half saying this war is coming. He ran away and joined as a sepoy in the Rajput regiment and went and took part in the 1962 war. And his train was going, and he sent me a message. The train is going, we are going to the forward area. It's going via Allahabad. We don't know what time, but it will be there sometime in the daytime. So if you want, you can come and meet me. I knew one more officer of the battalion who was a dear friend, who was, of course, much older than I was. So I went to Allahabad to see, and here was sitting in the train saying, hey, I'm going, you're missing out. I mean, what's so great about becoming an officer? You're missing out. I'm going to see this war. So that was the type of passion. That was the type of this thing, how it was. I also want to tell you, we also saw, the other things. We saw the troops going to Congo. We met the officers who had come back from the Congo in 1960, who went for the peacekeeping operations. And they came back and talked about India's flag showing India's role in the world. So in 1960, we sent a brigade group along with the aircraft, the air force, the tanks, the guns, to sort out the Congolese rebels. And there we used very robust peacekeeping we did. We used the infantry, the artillery, the armor, and the air force. So we did not hesitate to be robust over there. Surprisingly, 2 years down the line, we were not so robust against the Chinese. Now that's something we have to look around. Hey, what went wrong? Why were we not? Why did we hesitate to use the air force against the Chinese when we didn't hesitate to use them against the Congolese? What was and these are some issues we can debate and look at. As Atul said, yes, I joined the army in 64, retired in 2008 as an army commander. Great journey, great life, enjoyed every bit of it. But when I talk of my joining the India of 1964, it also reminds me of a thing called PL 480. I don't know how many of you know about PL 480. Would anybody like to take a guess? Not you all, sir, from amongst the students. Anybody who would like to take a guess at it? What was PL480? What was happening in India? Anybody? Sir, anybody who knows about? Yes, sir, please. What was it? Can you just? I'm sorry, I don't know your name, and I hope you won't mind my pointing out a bad form to point out. Excellent, sir. Public Law 480 was a law passed by America to provide food aid to countries. So when I joined the NDA, we were getting food aid, and the common term used was India was living from ship to mouth. If a ship did not arrive, there would be no food. That was the condition in 64. I mean, today it's different. We had a green revolution, we had a white revolution, we have an egg revolution, we have the beef revolution, you name it, we have it today. So what were we taught? We were told, hey, you guys, you're going to join the army, you're ready to give your life. So why can't we give some of our rations to the countrymen? So we started giving a part of our rations to our countrymen. And they said, that's part of it. This is a very minor thing you're doing. You're preparing to give your life, so what's giving food, a couple of days food in a month if you give, what's so great about it? So sorry. So we began looking at sacrifice, we began looking at commitment to our country, we began, that was what was ingrained into us. Give anything for the country, nothing is too big. Due to paucity of time, I won't go on to all these things. I'll come back to this talk for the Indian need for 21st century. But you know, I have decided to not give you a blank talk and say, hey, this is what it is. I thought it would be better to understand what led us to where we are. What were the historical reasons? What are our troubles today? And if you look back, all our troubles today have their genesis, their beginning in the years immediately after our independence. So if you don't understand the historical concept, and you don't understand the mistakes we made, and you don't understand how we rectified them, and you don't, look around and get the right picture, I think we will not be able to look ahead. So I'm going to talk, I will of course talk in the end as to what is my prescription for a strategy, but basically my talk will be looking at how did we fare, and the period I looked around was how did we fare from the year 1945 till today. And why do I look at 1945 and not 47? When you start looking around, nowhere will you find a division of time. Today, if you say, let's divide time, everybody will talk about Cold War, fall of Berlin Wall, 9/11, and so on. But they are important events, but are they relevant to us? They are relevant, yes, but there are other issues which are more relevant, which we should be looking at. There are other timelines which are more critical to our nation. And if we don't understand that, again, we'll make a mistake and look around for the next term being coined by somebody to say, this is what we were doing when there was the next Cold War II or whatever it is. So for the purpose of my talk, I have divided the periods from 1945 to 1962 as the first portion, and I always call this the period of innocence and the period of idealism. Second part is from 1963 to 1990, a very important part, which most of us just gloss over and we don't know what was happening from 1963 to 1990. This was the period of consolidation, and this was the period when we found our place within the region. We reclaimed back our izzat. We were visible, we were ready to be seen not just in our own country, but we were ready to say, hey, we can step beyond our borders, and you better start looking at us a little differently. Forget about 48, forget about 62. We are different today. And that is what happened. And I will tell you, it's very interesting. There was something on, as I said, consolidation, but there was also insurgencies which came. Naxalism came in there. Punjab problem happened there. Naga Peace Accord happened there. So a lot of churning was taking place. And how did all this interact with each other, we need to understand. Otherwise, we'll get what strategy are you talking of if you don't understand what was happening inside your country. The third period I looked around is a very small period, 1991 to 1998. And I tell you why I looked at this period, just that period. This is the period in which the world acknowledged that we have arrived. People started now talking of not a poor country, a famished country. They started saying, hey, there's a future global power. So they started looking at you with, they found that we have got our act together right, and we're on the lines to become a future power, a global power. Of course, we are far from it, I understand that. But the world started seeing us with different vision. And then from 99 to today, what is it happening here? Nobody now calls this a swing state. We're not something more that somebody is buying something and you put 2 more kilos and that side becomes a little heavier. No. They are saying from swing state, we are saying we are looking at being a power ourselves. Whether we achieve it or we slip is a different issue. But we have the potential. We are not looking at a unipolar world. We are not looking at a bipolar world. We are saying, hey, there will be a tripolar world. I'll talk about that. And so my talk is on these 3 things. Now, coming to the first part, from 1945 to 1962, the first thing I want to say is the World War II had ended. What is the impact of that over here? And I'm talking from the security part of it. The Indian Army, which was the largest volunteer army the world had ever seen, had fielded 2.5 million troops in the Second World War. It earned laurels all over. There would have been no victory in Southeast Asia. The Japanese would have not been defeated without the Indian Army. There would have been a different, the world wars, both the First and Second World Wars, history would have been different without the Indian Army. And I say it quite proudly. So the Indian Army had proved its mettle. And when it comes back, what happens? It starts getting disbanded. People are now thrown out because we don't need 2.5 million people. So lakhs and lakhs of our soldiers are now demobilized. They're without jobs, they're without a thing. Whether you are wounded or you are in one piece is immaterial, you're being thrown out. But did we realize that this trained manpower, battle-hardened manpower, is available to us when independence comes? Because in 45, 46, there was no doubt left independence is coming. Whether it's on 15th August 47, or it is going to be in 48, or it's going to be in 46, a different issue. But nobody had a doubt that we are going to be independent. So did we look around at this trained manpower as a pool available to us, that should it be needed for? I don't think we did it. I don't think we bother about them. And I don't think we use them. Sorry, sir? Yes. Now, Subhash Bose I would say Subhash Bose, the Indian National Army is again, was not looking at this part of it. When he came back here, we're looking at an independent country which is looking at, did it use this manpower? The question I was asking is, did the country look at this pool of disbanded soldiers? We had the equipment. Our ordnance depots were full of machine guns and rifles and ammunition because each man also gave his weapon. So were we short of weapons? The answer is no. In 45, we didn't, or 47, 48, we didn't need the modern weapon that we're looking at. All that you needed was a rifle or a light machine gun. That was what you fought your wars with. We had adequate numbers. I always have been asking, and we used to hear this question from my childhood, were we really preparing for our independence? Were we really looking at our country being an independent country? What did it mean to be an independent country? Was our leadership looking at it? And from my listening to the debate and my research and my study, I don't think we were preparing ourselves for the consequences of partition and independence. I repeat, we were not at all preparing ourselves for the consequences of partition and independence. And I say it with a sense of, a very serious sense. It's not flippant. And I'm not being critical of the civilian administration, and I'm not a political party man that I'm trying to bring down one party or the other party, so don't get me wrong. What was the condition over here? We had an interim government. It was formed on 2 September 1946. And the Vice President of the Executive Council was Mr. Sri Jawaharlal Nehru. Pandit Nehru was the Executive Vice President, which was equivalent to a Prime Minister. The Deputy Prime Minister and Home Minister was Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. The Defense Minister was Sardar Baldev Singh. Now, were these people, these learned people, looking at what is coming ahead? Were they looking at matters which they should have been looking at? Were they reaching out and doing their jobs in the interest? I don't think so. I would say the implications of change, and I have again tried to put this on geography and territory. Our geography was going to change because of partition. The size of our territory was going to change, so our borders were going to change. Did we think of it as to what it would mean to have different borders? Did we understand what would happen as to if some state joins us and doesn't join us? Were we trying to shape those states to come and join us? I don't think so. We were just waiting, and if it happened, we were floundering around to say, hey, this chap has not joined us, why not? What's happened? And, you know, so we were reacting, whereas we were not preparing ourselves. I personally feel nobody had looked at the map of India. And I mean, it was very serious, this thing. If they had looked at the map of India, they would have understood the importance of Jammu and Kashmir. They would have, you know, did they understand? Why do I say it? Can anybody say as to what would have been the importance of Jammu and Kashmir at that point in time? Anybody? If they had looked at from the students, not from the faculty. Anybody would like to say, why do I say it was critical for us? Of course, Hyderabad was critical. Of course, other parts of territory were also. Why do I look around at Jammu and Kashmir? Because Jammu and Kashmir has the largest borders. It would have been, you know, since nobody has volunteered to answer, Jammu and Kashmir, if it had been with India, there would have been no borders between Pakistan and China. You put Jammu and Kashmir there, that's India, there would have been no common borders between. Second thing, we would have had connectivity with Afghanistan, because we would have been getting into the Wakhan corridor. We had connection there. Did you understand the importance of this? I say, no, we don't. We didn't. And even after 48 war, and I'm going to prove it, if we had understood, we would have fought the war a little differently. We would have put our resources a little differently. And we would have tried to make sure that we never lose Skardu, Gilgit, Baltistan, and would have held on to that area at least, if not the rest of it. The rest of it was not so important strategically. We're going to Muzaffarabad or not going to Muzaffarabad was not as important as going to Skardu and beyond. Was it within our capabilities? Yes, very much so. Did we do it? No, we didn't. The second is, you know, I don't think we looked at the security. What would be the impact of our partition and independence on security? There were internal disgruntlement starting in the northeast who were saying, hey, there were Rajas who were saying we look around at our own independence. How would that impact our security? I don't think we were doing enough. Did we try to shape? And how were we looking at human security? Did we understand that there would be security challenges of movement of these millions of people from across the borders? Did we look around and say that there will be requirement of protecting them? The answer is no, we didn't. Did you see any document? I don't see any document, and I'll talk about it. The next thing, two things more I want to talk about, is if we were going to inherit and be the inheritors of the British Raj over here, then we should have been knowing at least what was the British strategy in India. And what is that strategy which we wanted to follow out of those? How would it impact us? And I would just point out three things. They believed in the concept of buffer states, and for them, Tibet and Afghanistan were buffer states. So we had to look around and say, did we need a buffer state or not have a buffer state? And which would the buffer states be there? Then their strategy was to dominate the Indian Ocean from the Gulf of Aden to Singapore. Since we were a power over here, what is it that we want to do in the Indian Ocean? The third thing the British always had was a surplus military power. What do I mean by surplus military power? That means they had the military power to make sure that they can rule India, take care of all the troubles that may emerge in India, and yet have forces available to deploy for their security concerns beyond our borders. Are you aware that one of our commands, the Western Command, used to look at Aden, and another command used to look at Singapore? I don't think people know it. So the army commander sitting here was not looking only at the border next to his nose. He had responsibility to look at Aden. He had troops earmarked for it. There were troops earmarked for Singapore. So that surplus military power gives you that capacity to have out-of-area contingencies. So you can't suddenly say, I'm a global power, I'm a regional power, I'll be net security provider. Provide with what? You provide security with the military. And if you don't have surplus military power, you have everybody deployed here and you still say there is a gap, then how can you provide security? So I don't think we looked at this. And the last thing I want to say is ministers were sitting in the Executive Council. What were the discussions taking place? Because they were there. And I would just like to point out two things, because I'm talking on security and I'm looking at the army part of it. The two issues which they were debating was, sorry, should the Indian army be divided or not? And can anyone take a guess as to what would have been the British view, the Congress view, and the Muslim League view? I want some students to be answering, otherwise I'll just point my finger and, hey, can you take a guess as to what could have been the discussion going on the issue of dividing the Indian army? Anyone? Give me a guess. There's nothing wrong. There is no, people make mistake in Kaun Banega Crorepati also. So what's wrong if you give a wrong answer here? Anyone, please? No? Sorry, sir? The discussions were based on two issues. One was, should Indian army be divided because the country was being divided? The British and the Congress were opposed to dividing the Indian army. They said Indian army should remain undivided. Indian army should remain undivided. Unbelievable. Working? I said the emotion. This is for recording your own recordings, so that's why. Oh, yeah. Thank you for reminding me. I should be more careful, you mean? No, I'm not going to change. I'm going to be as provocative and more provocative and not less provocative. This is for the sound. No, okay. No, that was in the lighter vein. So they were discussing and saying, should it be divided? The British were saying, no, the Indian army should not be divided. Your troubles are not going to be on the borders between India and Pakistan, whether Pakistan is 1 or 2. Your borders will be beyond that. Your worries will be beyond that. And you both must take it together. Actually, they also had their own interest. They were looking around, we're moving out from here. Will there be a how will they protect the British interests in the Indian Ocean? How will they protect the British interest in this part? The Congress also said, yes, it should not be divided. The country can be divided, but the army can't be divided. And the Muslim League was saying, divide it now. What are you waiting for Independence Day? Start doing it now. And they said, don't do it now, because then you will have mayhem. Because these two armies, part of armies also will start fighting. They'll say, hey, I'm not part of you. But the Muslim League was saying no, and they had a rationale. How can you have two independent sovereign states and not have a sovereign army and army under somebody else? So finally, the argument was one that the armed forces have to be divided. But the only thing they kept, they did not publicize to the rest of the country was that we don't want this partition to take place too early, because there was a fear that they may radicalization. But the Muslim League was saying, no, we want every Muslim who's in the Indian army out and they should come to us. Whereas the logic was, hey, they should be given a choice, join India, Pakistan, or whatever they want to do, or leave the army. And that is how it remained. Now, I have been saying, so you knew all this was happening, this was all happening, then how come you didn't realize the importance of the army? How come you were saying that there is no, we hear nothing from our side about what Sardar Baldev Singh came and said, how did we look around? We said, keep it secret, let nobody know about it. Whereas the Muslim League said, no, every Muslim in the army must know about it. So there was a dichotomy. So there was a hardening, and that's why when you look at 47, just immediately after independence, they were saying, hey, they are our enemy. But we were saying, hey, they are our friends. They were together serving with us. That mismatch happened because on one side they were told, you have to leave and you don't have to be with them. And an interesting thing over here is about the Gurkhas. We had Gurkhas. We had 20 battalions of the Gurkhas who were there. So they also have to be given a choice whether you want to stay in India or go to Nepal. And the British said, we will take 20%, 8 battalions we'll take of yours into the British army. So they said, we want your choice to be given. And you'll be amazed to know that 90% of the Gurkhas said, we want to serve in Indian army, don't even want to go to Britain, forget about going to Nepal. That was the thing. But finally the decision was no, there will be 12 battalions will be left in India and 8 battalions will go to Britain. So that is how it was divided. Now I also want to tell you, were we really looking at what the British were discussing prior to the independence? And these people who were in power, In the army, there were no real senior officers, and they made sure that the Indian army officers, most of them wouldn't have known. I don't know if anybody got to know what these documents were, but the ministers knew. The Executive Committee Council knew what was the debate. And I just want to read out something to you to tell you as to what they were discussing. On a top secret note of 11th May 1946, Field Marshal Sir Claude Auchinleck, who was the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces in India, he had written a paper on the strategic implications of including Pakistan in the British Commonwealth. He was given a task. We have a choice. Should we have Pakistan in the British Commonwealth and not allow India to come into the Commonwealth? What would be the effect of that, and what do you recommend? You are the man sitting in Delhi. You are the Commander-in-Chief over here. What is your assessment? And I would just like to read out something from this thing, because this has a bearing on our defense. What did he write in that note assessment? This is a note I again repeat for deciding whether Pakistan should join the Commonwealth and India should not be allowed to join. What were the repercussions if the British did this? He writes, should India be unfriendly or liable to be influenced by a power such as Russia, China, or Japan? So whom were they looking at? That these are the chaps who will influence India. If that was to happen, then the British strategic position in the Indian Ocean would become untenable, and our communications with New Zealand and Australia would become most insecure. That means if India is not with us, that is what will happen. Second, he wrote, and India outside the Commonwealth might be tempted to grab back or reintegrate Pakistan into India. So we can, temper them and say, don't do it. The third thing, his assessment, he's a commander-in-chief. He knows what it is. He knows the Pakistani army. And he writes and says, Pakistan will absorb Kashmir or at any rate dominate Kashmir. Well, that was his feeling on 11th May 1946. How come we were sort of oblivious to what the Commander-in-Chief thinks the Pakistanis would do? And he says the threat to Pakistan will come from Xinjiang. Xinjiang now, Xinjiang is what will threaten Pakistan. The threat to them will come from there. And so what his final thing was, if we desire, it's a long paper, I've taken out only the extracts. If we desire to maintain our power to move freely by sea and air in the Indian Ocean area, which I consider essential to the continued existence of the British Commonwealth, we can do so only by keeping India as a willing member of the Commonwealth, ready to share in its defense to the limit of our resources. So look at it, they were leaving India. They were talking about the importance of keeping India with them. Now that is something we need. But did we realize this, and did we use this thinking of theirs to our advantage, that they want you with them? Could we have used this in any way? I don't think we looked at it in that way. And so the second letter I will just go on was by General Sir Francis Tucker. He was the army commander of the Eastern Army. He was the one who was looking at China. He was the one looking at what did he say? And his letter, he writes, the importance of northern and northeast frontiers in the defense of India. He's elaborated that the most crucial thing will be the importance of northern and northeastern India, implying what we call J&K and northeast now, eastern side. That is the most crucial thing for the defense of India. He's saying this. And he was convinced that China and not Russia would be the main threat to India. Mind you, till they were ruling, the main threat was Russia. The challenge would have come from Russia. But in 46, when they were about to leave, and he was the commander-in-chief till 14th August, he started saying, no, the threat to India will come to my command, will come from China and not from Russia. And the next thing he said, with the coming of air power, the importance and impregnability of Himalayas has decreased. So there's no more a barrier. And he says, with the withdrawal of the British from India, Tibet would lean more and more towards China. I don't know if we took cognizance of any of these. I mean, it's clear, he's staring in the face. Here's a man who's saying, get prepared for this. This is where your threat is coming for. And we just throw that paper in a piece in the dustbin and say, nonsense. We don't need an army, we don't need this plan. Who's this Lieutenant General telling us what to do? And then I'll go on two more letters I would like to speak. I'm saying this in the historical sense. Understand the importance. When you get advice, professional advice, there has to be good reason for dumping it. You just can't dump it. You have to give a reason why you're dumping it. Sack the man otherwise. Even though you can't have a professional advice being given and just thrown away. Then the next letter is from Field Marshal Lord Wavell. He was the Viceroy of India. He wrote a report to His Majesty the King of England on 24th February 1947. And what did he say? Our power in India has always depended on prestige rather than on numbers. The damage to our prestige was begun in the First World War and the years that followed it. It seems remarkable to me how even at the present time, when our power has been so greatly reduced, the momentum of our prestige still enable us to influence the events to the extent that we do. Now that's again something for us to understand. Hey, should we not have been shaping the agenda at the time of independence? And the last letter I want to read is very damning. You know, damning. It's a letter from some Sir Evan Jenkins, who was the last British governor of Punjab. And he wrote a couple of letters to Mountbatten. It's a large number of letters there. So I've taken out from one of those letters. And this was written on 15 June 1947, just 2 months prior to our independence. And what does he write? He says it was ordained. I repeat the word, it was ordained from the first that the communities, that is the Hindu and Muslim communities, should massacre and loot one another. Nothing can alter this. Partition seems simpler and perhaps the less bloody form of it. The politicians do not yet realize what they're in for. What can be more damning than this from a governor of this? That the politicians don't know this is going to happen. Now here's the governor of the state writing this letter to the Viceroy. This is going to happen, and we don't take note of it. I mean, it surprises me as to how we don't bother about this. Now, coming on to some of the, I think through. Then one more thing in 47, I think India's most effective instrument and power and order, the Indian Army, with a 200-year-old history, was broken up, and that too within just 21 days. And prior to this, we had seen the demobilization of the Indian soldiers. On 7 August 1947, just 8 days before our independence, the British units started moving out of India, even though they had foreseen a bloodbath taking place here. They just wanted to desert us. It's your headache. And that's part of it. During partition, 2 million lives were lost and unaccounted millions were rendered homeless. But look at the genius of the British. Not a single Englishman or woman was even injured. They all left India peacefully, their security guaranteed by the state. But the security of a common man, 2 million killed, was not guaranteed. Just about the war of 47-48, as I mentioned, I don't think we realize the importance of J&K. But more from the military point of view, I think we also failed by not being able to take back Gilgit or to relieve Skardu. A small contingent held on at Skardu for 8 months. If we had looked at the map and understood the importance of Skardu, we should have taken it back. There would have been no CPEC, there would have been no continuity, nothing would have happened. We did not take it back. Why? There was no dearth of manpower, as I told you. There was no dearth of equipment. There was no dearth. Air Force also, we had the air also. Then, of course, the failure to, I'll leave all that. Referring the matter to UN, all of you know, I think that's something which is there. Then I think we didn't take adequate, after independence, did we realize what was the implication of the People's Republic of China being formed next to us? And did we understand they're gobbling up Tibet? For the first time in our history, thousands of years old history, we are going to have China as our neighbor. And we started rubbing China, our shoulders started rubbing each other, and there's been friction ever since. And it will continue, that's my assessment. I would like to talk about the 1962 war. You're all aware of it, as to what the 62 war was all about. I would only like to make some points about both these wars. I'll make a little later. I would like to also now just read out about letter from Sardar Patel. We talk of two-front now, two-front war, as if it's something new. Let me tell you what the Indians thought, what the Chinese thought, and what the Pakistanis thought. This letter from Sardar Patel, written on 7th November 1950 to the Prime Minister. It was, I believe, drafted by Sir Girja Shankar Vajpayee, who was the head of the Foreign Ministry, the Secretary General as he was called. He writes, thus, for the first time after centuries, India's defense has to concentrate itself on two fronts simultaneously. So it's not something new. In our calculations, we should now have to reckon with Communist China in the north and northeast also. It is also clear that the actions will have to be fairly comprehensive, involving not only our defense strategy and state of preparations, but also problem of internal security to deal with, which we have not a moment to lose. So he had foreseen what was coming in internal security. He had foreseen what was coming on the two-front war. Did you take note of it? Answer is no. But very interestingly, what is the China's view of this two-front war, which nobody has published writes about? You tell the Chinese, they all look down and pretend that this must have been something cooked up by people like me. It's on record, so I can say it is a record. On 16 May 1955, the Chinese ambassador in Delhi, in his meeting with our foreign secretary, said, and I quote, China will not be so foolish as to antagonize the US in the east and again to antagonize you, India, in the west. We cannot have two centers of attention. It seems to us that you also cannot have two fronts. Is it not so? If it is so, here lies the meeting point of two sides. So that is something we have to look around. So they were also worried. So they were not so gung-ho. They were not so... So in 55, the things were different. Did we use this? How did we factor this in? I don't know. But what about Pakistan? When the Pakistanis learned of this, that the Chinese and Indian want to make up, they were furious. And what did Field Marshal Ayub Khan say on 27 November 1959 in a press interview abroad? He warned India that without our concurrence, look at that, without our concurrence, any settlement between China and India will be something we will not recognize. So they wanted that friction to continue. How can you patch up? What happens to us if you patch up? I mean, that is a very interesting thing. And they say, take our concurrence. So this is something I thought I will quickly tell you about something about the Sino-Indian War and what I thought. The only one or two points I will flag. I don't think we realized what we were doing by going to the UN. And I don't think any one of us looked around as to how Pakistan would react and what would the implication of Pakistan's reaction. You all know there were three clauses. First was ceasefire. Second was Pakistan will withdraw its military. And third was there will be a referendum or a plebiscite. Pakistan knew these three clauses. They were very happy because they were not going to accept the second clause, that is withdraw. And they were very sure that if they don't accept the second clause, India can't take the third clause. So there will be a stalemate. We will continue being there. We will give us time to become stronger in that area. So that was the beautiful thing they did. In both the wars, we did not bring to bear our complete military might. Although we talk about it as a India-China war, but the total Indian strength was just about 12,000 troops against about 80-odd thousand. It's all recorded from the Chinese books also, what they brought in against us. To say the Indian army lost, yes, Indian army, that part of the Indian army lost, and we are ashamed of that. We rectified it. That's we are looking around. But did we put the might of the Indian army? The answer is no. We did not. Did we use the Air Force? The answer is no. We did not use the Air Force in the 62 war, as I had mentioned earlier. Both these wars left us with loss of territory, undemarcated borders, and inconclusive wars which continue till today. One normally believes that we did not have enough manpower and equipment just after independence. Let me give you the exact figures so that you understand that no, we had manpower. Don't think we didn't have it. When the Indian Army was partitioned, I'll give you figures just for the Indian Army and Air Force because the Navy was not involved in the 47-48 war. We got a total of 88 infantry battalions, including 12 of the Gurkhas. Pakistan got 33. Okay. We got 12 armored regiments, they got 6. We got 18.5 artillery regiments, they got 8.5. We got 25 companies of the field engineers against 11 of theirs. These are the normal battle fighting. As far as the Air Force is concerned, it got 7 squadrons, fighter squadrons against 2 with the Pakistanis. Of course, we did not have the fighter bases in J&K. Could we have done something? How could we have done things? Could we have used, we did use the Air Force, even in Skardu relief, we used the Tempest aircraft. Could we have, even the Pakistanis were using it. Could we have done something more is the question that comes to mind. Similarly, during the 1962 war, the Air Force strength went up from 7 fighter squadrons to 22 squadrons. So we had actually invested money. We were looking at, and the right decision. We needed to increase our Air Force, and we did it, but we didn't use it. And I don't know if any of you know how much money we purchased, how much equipment we purchased from the period 1950 to 1962, and I'll only talk of 4 countries. We bought equipment worth 4.612 billion US dollars from UK. That is 4,612 million. We bought from France 794 million dollars. From USSR we bought 610 million, and from the US 248 million. The only question we have to look around is and say, did we buying the right things, which was needed then? For example, to my mind, and my naval friends always berate me for it, did we need the aircraft carrier Vikrant, HMS Hercules? HMS Hercules was under construction when the Second World War ended. It kept lying incomplete, and they wanted somebody to take it because they were short of money. And in 1957, we agreed to buy it. And we bought it, then the construction started on it, and we got it in 1961. Did we need an aircraft carrier in 1961? Compared to what we were looking around, the threat which was going to emanate from China, what had happened from Pakistan. And that's the point I make, and we can keep debating it. I think I'll move on to the next one, that interesting period, as I said, of 63 to 1990. Firstly, of course, we started modernizing. Not many of you would know that during the 62 war itself, we raised 2 divisions of the Indian Army. So if we wanted to do it in 48, we could have done it even more easily because the troops were available. So if we could do it in 62, we could have done it 48 also. And of course, we raised a large number of more units. In 1963, Pakistan transferred Shaksgam, a part of J&K, to China and ceded it to them as a treaty. And you know, that is the beginning of their friendship. It was looking for peace with China. It was looking for Chinese support. And they thought a time is now ripe for us to do what we want to do with India. 64, the Chinese go nuclear. So we start looking around that now China, with whom we have fought a war and we lost, is going nuclear. So obviously we need to balance that. 65, the Indo-Pak War. I won't bore you with the details. The only thing is, Tashkent Agreement. We ask ourselves, if the same thing had happened to China and they were brought to a table and said, hey, give back Hajipur, would they have given it back? The answer is no. They won't give an inch of territory. Forget about Hajipur. So you can say, yeah, the Russians were forcing us and this was forcing us and we are poor, they have Security Council vote. You look around at countries like Vietnam, look at countries like, China, they couldn't care less. They were not members of this thing. They fought the world. They stood on their own. So why were we doing it differently? I'll go on to 1967. Now, 67, there are 2 important things. Naxalite movement, internal problem. But again, not known to most of the people, and definitely not known to, in China we go around, we have a lot of MOUs and understanding with China's universities, China's think tank, military think tanks, and we rub it in. They don't talk to us in closed door about 62. Because the moment they open their mouth on 62, we say, have you forgotten 1967? In 1967, in Sikkim, we gave the Chinese a bloody nose. You can read about the operation in 1967. So they don't talk about it. They don't say, hey, we suffered a defeat. They don't say. So they understood that you're ready. They couldn't believe that you have fought a 65 war. And in 67, you're taking on a nuclear-armed country when you're not nuclear-armed. I think you have to understand the message. A non-nuclear armed India taking on a nuclear armed China in 1967. I jumped 71 war, Bangladesh, all of us know it, so I won't talk about it. And I think we made a mess of the Shimla Agreement. I think we did not do justice to our victory. We derived nothing from it diplomatically. And to my mind, the Shimla Agreement, as a military man, I feel sorry that we did not use that opportunity better. That's all. I leave it at there. 74, we did a nuclear explosion. We could call it peaceful. Nuclear explosion is nuclear explosion. So whether it's peaceful or not is for anybody to decide. The message goes loud and clear. That bang is the same whether you use it for peace or for war. So in 1975, there are 2 things. There's emergency in the country internally, and on the Naga side, we are having Nagas agreed for a peace accord. So we see a Naxal movement coming up and we see a Naga movement going down. 1984, Operation Blue Star. We are all aware of it, so I don't have to talk about what happened in Punjab. But it's important because there are all these things that are happening. The military is involved in all these. The nation is involved in all these. There is a thing to understand about it. Then I go on to an interesting period, 86, 87, 88. 86, 87 is the time actually the Indian Army demonstrated that, hey, we are we are not worried about the Pakistanis, we are not worried about the Chinese, and we are not worried about both of you together. We carried out an exercise called exercise Brass Tacks, you may have heard of it, when we mobilized on the Western Front. It could have gone on, led on to war. Somebody said it was bellicose, somebody says it was wrong on the army chief to have done it. Of course, the whole of Indian Army does not mobilize only because the army chief says it. It had political clearance. So we demonstrated that we can concentrate the whole of the Indian Army, 6 lakh odd troops were concentrated there, we can move all our armor, everything, and be there at a point if we want. So don't look at us as there are no weak spots. Why I say this? Because after 71, Pakistan started looking, they had only one front to worry about, the India front. All their military, they raised to the same level as they had before the 71 war. They were waiting to take revenge. And all the exercises, they would look around and say, we are going to launch the war. After 86, 87, these exercises, and 71 war, a bit of it, all the exercises have become defensive. They say, India will launch the offensive. And then we will fight back. And then we'll use tactical nuclear weapons and all that. So that was one message. So the gung-hoism disappeared from Pakistan, that we will drive to Delhi, you don't hear of it. You don't even hear of they're going to Firozpur, forget about any other place. Then I go on to Op Falcon. Now this was something which is classical. The army, again this is all under Sundarji only, deployed a brigade in area north of Tawang in Samdurong Chu. It airlifted, heli-lifted and deployed a brigade 70 odd kilometers north of Tawang, where we were in 62. The Chinese never expected. When we landed up there, there was an issue and we were not going to withdraw from there. A lot of pressure came from the powers that be. Hey, the Indian Army, what is it doing? You're going for a war again. And the answer of General Sundarji was, well, I think the Cabinet Committee of Security has said Tawang must be protected. Thereafter, it's a military decision how to protect Tawang. I can't protect Tawang by sitting in the monastery. Tawang will be protected by the way we deploy them. And so he did it. And that's where we stand today. So there was another message given to the Chinese. Hey, we are not worried. We are going to be where we want to be. And the next year, we carried out an exercise called exercise Checkerboard. Now this Checkerboard was again mobilization of the Indian Army on the east and north. The Chinese also mobilized. We had a standoff. And who would blink first? We were ready to not blink. So the strength actually then led to what? It led to the Chinese also realizing that it's not in our interest to carry on the standoff. It's not in our interest to fight a war. So they led to diplomacy. It led to Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi visiting China in 1888. And it led to an agreement being signed to maintain peace and tranquility in the border in 1993. The point I'm making is if you stand up, nobody pushes you. But if you lie down, everybody kicks you. So that is the message. So what is the message we gave here? So I was trying to tell you that this period, what all happened here? We not only consolidated, we not only fought the 65 war, we not only created Bangladesh in 71, we stood up to Pakistan, China, everybody. And we also went across. We went to Maldives, we went to Sri Lanka. Right or wrong is immaterial. We took a decision, a government decision. It was a policy. We were ready to go beyond our borders. We were ready to shape our environment. We were no more a power constrained by our own borders. That was the message we were giving. Should the need arise, we will, in our national interest, we are ready to go beyond. I come to the next part and the period of 1991 to 1998. Why do I say it's the most fascinating period? Why did the world start looking at us differently? It is because of our economic liberalization in 1991 and the nuclear explosion in 1998. Sanctions or no sanctions, the world saluted you, respected you. So sanctions, and we were going to bear the sanctions. We had borne the sanctions in 74. In 1998, we could have borne it. There's just no problem. Did the world accept your rise economically? And did the world accept your rise militarily? Did the world accept you as a nuclear power? The answer is yes. And that is the change of this period. So I've taken only this 1991 to 1998 to say, look at this period a little more critically. It is a follow-up what we had done till 88, 89, 90, and 91, 9, and 98. We built on what we had done earlier. So we are now not only militarily, we are also saying we are a nuclear power, we are economic power. And I come to the last period of 1991 to date. Of course, 1999, Prime Minister Vajpayee visits Lahore, but something else happens is the Indian Airlines flight which gets hijacked and is taken to Kandahar. The army evicts Pakistanis from Kargil. Would anyone like to take a shot? Should we have crossed the line of control and should we have enlarged the war, or what we did was right? The debate was there, carrying on that part. Anyone? Or you say you all are not read about it? Anyway, we didn't cross the line of control. Due to paucity of time, if there is some time after this, I will discuss about it. Then the attack on Parliament in 2001. And this was the most misunderstood deployment. And a large number of people have commented, oh, it was a waste of effort. Why did he mobilize and he didn't go into war? What was called Op Parakram. The whole Indian Army mobilized. I was a divisional commander then, commanding a division which had an offensive role. So I'm totally privy to the plans, and I'm telling you from what was it? Why did we mobilize? What were the military aims? Was there a political aim? Was there a diplomatic aim? And to my mind, it was we deployed for coercive diplomacy. We were coercing the Pakistanis. We were not going to go to battle. We could have gone to battle. And believe me, in January, when my division was fully ready to go across, if we had gone across, we could have walked in. So it's not that they were ready. They were not at all ready. If you hear the conversations that we picked up from their side, they were worried. They were sort of, I can't use other expletives which we use in the army, but they were in a bad shape. There is, so why did we call it off? And I don't think most of the people realize what is coercive diplomacy. Coercive diplomacy is you're using force to coerce the enemy to do something you want. What is it that you wanted from the Pakistanis? I think we wanted a statement from the Pakistani president to say that his country will not be used for terror acts against India. And a date was given to him that he has to make the statement by that date following which the Indian army will not be restrained. And that was the message given to the world. On that particular day, Musharraf made a statement that the Pakistan will not allow its territory to be used. So did coercive diplomacy succeed? A failure of coercive diplomacy leads to war. So if that was your aim, what was the need to go to war? Now it can be discussed and debated. Should you have mobilized? Obviously you will have to mobilize to give a message. You can't give a message, if you don't dare, then I'll start my mobilization 2 months down the line. It doesn't happen like that. That's not how you mobilize. And this cold start, every war is a cold start. Does anybody know on 1st January 2019 there'll be a war? No. Something happens, you react now. The incidents in East Pakistan, we took 8 months to mobilize for it, and we won the war. That was cold start. We had to build up our strength. The Americans took months to come into Iraq for the first war. That was cold start. You develop your force. So what do you mean you are doing cold start, something new strategy? All armies protect the borders when the balloon goes up. And how do you protect your borders? Not by sitting in your bunkers. You protect it by sitting in your bunkers and by going across a little bit, denying the enemy his launch pads. That's what cold start is all about. All armies do it. So what's so great? We have made, and I think the best, if you want to read about how the world viewed it, please read the telegrams which were sent by the American embassy in Delhi about cold start, and is India serious about it? What have they done? Today, he said, you have a division in Secunderabad. I commanded my army in Jaipur. I had a division of mine in Ranchi. What cold start are you talking of? By the time they move from Ranchi to come to my place, the whole world will know. You move a division from Secunderabad to come to the borders, the whole world will know. If I move my armored division from Hisar, the whole world will know. So what is the secrecy part of it? Today, everybody picks up everything. So cold start is, I think, needs to be viewed a little more differently. Then I want to talk about Doklam standoff. I think it's all very new. All of you must be totally aware. So I won't talk about it. Then is the issue of the Quad. We are moving out beyond our, as I said, we have said, hey, we are ready to participate beyond our borders. So the quadrilateral between US, Japan, Australia and India, yes, we are. Is it to contain, to fight? No, we are saying we'll keep the sea lanes of communication open. We'll keep the established norms must be followed by all. There are international norms and rules must be followed by all. You can't do anything unilaterally. That's what we are saying, and we'll see how it shapes up. When the Chinese come and start deploying in Maldives or in Gwadar or in Hambantota or in Kyakfu in Myanmar or anywhere else, we'll see it then. So nobody's talking of war. Maybe they are also coming to protect their sea lanes. They'll be coming to protect their interest. We are protecting our interests. What's wrong? Why is that not being criticized? So I think we need to look around at that. So I've given a snapshot, and I would just like to read what General Zia-ul Haq said, because one question which is continuously coming till today is to why does Pakistan have this animosity towards India? And will this Aman ki Asha someday bring peace? Will there be more bus rides and things of that sort? I think we need to understand what they think, and not what we think, and not what we imagine and dream. So let me tell you, the late General Zia-ul Haq was near a reality when asked why Pakistan cultivated and maintained this policy of so much induced hostility towards India. And his reply is very instructive. He said, Turkey or Egypt, if they stop being aggressively Muslim, will remain exactly what they are, Turkey and Egypt. But if Pakistan does not become and remain aggressively Islamic, it will become India again. Enmity with India will mean getting swamped by the all-enveloping embrace of India. That is what he had said, and there is no change. I meet officers of the Pakistan Army who were of my vintage. I don't see an iota of change in their looking at us. Good to think of peace, good to have this thing, but be a little realistic also as to what will actually happen. To my mind, this is true even today and will remain true in the foreseeable future. Let's not forget our experience of Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai with the Chinese. You know, we have learned, and I hope nobody suggests Hindi Chini Paki Bhai Bhai. That will be disastrous for us. That's, as a military man, that's what I say. Now, do I have 10 more minutes, Atul? Can I take 10 more? Yeah, thank you. Coming back to now as to what is about strategy? What is it that we should be doing? Now, this I had set the stage, where we are, why we are there, what are the mistakes, what are the chances, what we should be doing. Now, a few words about strategy. Now, what is strategy or military strategy? Very simply put, military strategy is the practice of reducing an adversary's capacity and willingness to fight, period. Nothing more. And continuing to do so till our aims are met. That's what military strategy is all about. A good strategy has three components: ends, ways, and means. That is, what are your objectives, what is the course of action, and what are the resources. But there is a dilemma. And the dilemma is, what is the correct balance? How do we find out that what we have created, there's no scientific method to determine how much military power is needed, how much military power is adequate. There is no formula for it. I mean, I wish you all will devise some formula and say this is enough military power. So there is no, you do your guesswork and say this is how it will be, this is what it, and you leave it to the judgment of the professional. You ask the military man, these are the resources, what is it, what do you think about it? And he gives his own plan, and then a political civilian leadership takes a decision. It's not the military which takes a decision. You give your plans, this is the strategy we are recommending, and then it is there. So you have a discussion on it. So because if somebody says, can you prove it? No, I can't prove it. There is no way to prove it how the war will unfold. So what are the types of strategies? The most common being strategy of annihilation. Keep fighting till the other chap is totally decimated, destroyed. The policy of exhaustion, coercion, deterrence, etc. But today we also talk of cyber strategy. Now here, to you all I would say, to my mind, what is missing is technology. I think technology is vital to the practice of military strategy. We must know how to use technology to outsmart the adversary. He also has technology, you also have technology, he has manpower, you have manpower. What is it that can change the balance? And to my mind, I think we should look around and say how to use technology to beat his technology. The man-to-man, we will do something else. Can you do something to beat his technology, to suppress his technology, to give me the technological edge over my adversary? Manpower I've got, equipment, you know what I've got. I'll make my plans, I'll do all that, air support, naval support, all that, we'll do joint tests, we'll do all that. How can you, the technological people, help us and say, we will give you an advantage with the technology that you have to be better than technology that the enemy has. You know what the technology he has, you know the technology we have, you know the gaps. There is tremendous gap in the technological know-how between China and us. What is it you can do to suggest to asymmetrically defeat that gap? That is something we'll be looking at. Since we hear a lot about coercion and deterrence, let me tell you that there are two basic strategies that occur in wartime as well as peacetime. These two, both are there. So don't imagine this military strategy of coercion and deterrence only in war. Actually, you're coercing and deterring him in peace. And when it fails in peace, you go to war. That's something not understood. I have not been able to deter you, come and slap me. I have not been able to coerce you, don't listen to what you want to do. So that means it has failed. So failure of coercion and of deterrence in peacetime leads to war. So if you want me to be able to coerce or deter my opponent, you better give me the resources. That's one part of it. So coercion means compelling the adversary to do something, while deterrence is to dissuade the enemy from doing something. As I told you, if it fails in peacetime, it leads to war. Both deterrence and coercion require the same conditions for success. And what are those conditions? Intelligence about the enemy. Here again, technology is required. Today, we don't send patrols because the patrols only go a few kilometers. So can you develop technology to give us better intelligence? Can you develop technology to fuse the intelligence from the globals? It's not just the technology that you're picking up. What is somebody else picking up? Then you should have credible military power. You should monitor, carry on actively monitoring what the enemy is doing. And then you should have shared communication. Now, what does shared communication mean? If you're wanting to deter him or coerce him, he better know what you're doing. He better know what the costs are. He better know there's a new tactics being developed. He better know there's a new technology which is coming in. He better know you're doing some big exercises. These are methods of communicating. I don't say you pick up the mobile and say, hey, I'm doing this. You're signaling that this is my capability, this is my capacity. Should you misbehave, I'm going to use ABC. That is what is called signaling. To succeed in the cyber domain, a cyber strategy requires three capabilities, which all of you must be very better knowing than I know. Is firstly to deny access to data to the adversary, his ability to intervene and collect data, and the ability to manipulate data. Now, if all this is being done, then why do strategies fail? You know, we are doing everything. Why do strategies then fail? And I think we need to look around as to why strategies fail. They fail due to misjudgment, they fail due to miscalculations, and they fail due to missteps. And that is why it is said that a good strategist is more important than the strategy. Okay? And the wisdom of the strategist enables him to know when and how to adjust one's strategy. That is something you need to understand. That means you have to groom your leadership for becoming strategists. You must have faith in them. And I talk of leadership, political and military leadership. Both have to be groomed. You're not born with a genius because you're elected as MP, become a minister. You have to have some grooming for it. Similarly, for us, we have to have grooming for moving at the strategic level. And the most important reason for a strategy to fail is the refusal of the adversary to concede defeat. And let me give you an example here. Pakistan had adequate military resources in East Pakistan. If they decided to fight, we would not have been able to achieve our aim. They surrendered. A brigade would come and surrender to a battalion. They were armed. They had no dearth of ammunition. They had no dearth of arms. Their will to fight had gone. So they win. But if they had stood up, the war would have been different. We may not have been able to achieve the aim by that date. So it was superior genius of the strategy, the psychological pressure on the enemy, the internal pressure on the enemy, all this contributed to his raising his hand and surrendering. Now I go on to after all this, then what should be a strategy for 21st century? I don't want to say about what the world is, etc., what is the hierarchy of power, etc., due to shortage of time. But I would say that we need to prepare for our growing role on the world stage. And as a first step, I would like to say that let's bring out a white paper. Let's begin stepwise. Let there be a white paper. What should the white paper be containing and what should it be communicating? A white paper is not a strategy. It's giving some intentions. This is what's happening. This is what we need to do. And what should this white paper include if ever we bring out a white paper? And that is what I'm going to, from this white paper, I think will flow the security strategy, from which will flow the defense strategy, and also the diplomatic strategy, and also the economic strategy. We can't have these silos, they can't develop separately anymore if you're going to be a big power. So, very briefly, I have listed out 15 points which are this white paper must include if you really want to give a message. And what are those? First, I have said the aim should be not just to achieve security. That paper must communicate. I'm saying that paper, if you write, must communicate these things. That we're not only going to achieve security, but we'll also shape the international environment. I mean, you want to be a global power. Your white paper of a power which is aspiring to be a power, at least a regional power. It must also tell the world that we have autonomy in decision making, and we will increase our nation's comprehensive national power. So that the message going around, we're not going to be only moving in one direction. So it is economic, human security, food, energy security, everything will be taken care of. We should be able to anticipate, prevent, deter, and intervene if needed to protect our nation and its people. And also be able to prevent destabilization of friendly countries. Hey, you're talking of a power, you're going to have friends. They look up to you and say, hey, will you help me in times of need? So your white paper should be saying this intent. So you must be, only when that white paper gives an intent will you say, hey, I need a capability. No, of course, you will not publish the white paper if you're not going to do this as a strategy. I'm suggesting if you want to be people to be looking up to you, you will have to, and obviously you'll have to create the capabilities for it. And then the next is to spell out the capabilities to protect our integrity and sovereignty on land, sea and air, including cyber, space, energy security and security of the diaspora. It must be mentioned in it, because then it becomes clear that you are going to automatically go beyond your borders. Nuclear deterrence will remain an essential part of the security doctrine. So don't shy away from it, but also say hey, you'll be willing to talk about global nuclear disarmament, non-proliferation, etc. So you don't close the door and one say, I have nothing to do with that. If the whole world denuclearizes, we'll also denuclearize. Create an out-of-area contingency force, I've been talking about it. Try to shape the international peacekeeping and peace-building environment before you try to shape the rest of the international environment. Increase cooperation with other countries in fight against terrorism and organized crime. That is how you start increasing your... Then there's a need for effective coordination between the agencies involved in internal security challenges and the military. We need to establish a more effective national crisis management capability. That must be spelled out in the white paper. What is our national crisis management, this thing? We have to reorganize the Ministry of Defense and the armed forces. Then we also need to realize one thing, we can't do everything alone. We need to have effective partnerships and need be alliances. Let's stop fooling ourselves that we can do everything alone. We can't do it alone. The day we accept that, we will move ahead. Otherwise, we will take a long time. Then help restructure the defense industry, or talk about restructuring the defense industry and bring it in your white paper so people get a message that you're ready to have partnerships with your allies and friends. And restructure the National Security Council. The actual bottleneck to all this will be the lack of adequate financial support. You write all this and don't talk about finance, people say, hey, this is nothing. So in your white paper, you'll also have to talk about the financial support to all this that you're building up, in what time frame, how are you going to do it. And then, since it's a white paper, we should also talk about resolving territorial and boundary disputes with China and Pakistan on terms which are favorable terms, favorable to us and acceptable to us. Why do I say this? So that looks, hey, you're a reasonable country, you're a proud country, you're a big country, you're something of, no, I can resolve the border issue with you on terms which are this thing. So you're not saying I'll continue the war forever. I'm ready to have it resolved on my terms. So you're giving a message that I'm confident to talk to you, I'm confident to make you accept the changes that I want on the border. And the last thing, but not the least, the support of the entire nation is absolutely necessary for the security strategy to be effective. So in your white paper, please build up how are you going to mobilize the national support for this. And in conclusion, I would like to quote from Kautilya and from the historian Paul Kennedy. Kautilya's Arthashastra suggests that a country's capabilities, its relations with its neighbors, and timing all influence policy decisions about going to war. The decision to go to war must be a careful calculation. And then what does Kautilya say? And this is something very interesting, and I hope all our leaders remember it. Having ascertained power, place, time, profit, and danger of loss of men and material, march with full force. Otherwise, keep quiet. Simple. So if you don't have all this, then don't do the blustering and a little bit of going here and going there. And what does Paul Kennedy write, the author of The Rise and Fall of Great Powers, has said that economics underpins the rise and fall of great powers. He also stresses that factors such as geography, military organization, national morale, and alliances can be key to the success or failure of nations. Ladies and gentlemen, I have not given a talk on, especially on what is the strategy for 21st. I've said how we should move ahead, but I was more focusing on the historical aspect of us to understand that we did make mistakes, to understand we rectified the mistakes in the period which I talked about between 1969 to carrying on. We've improved. We have not tom-tommed it. We have never gone around and said, hey, we have sorted out all our problems. No, we have not sorted out all our problems, but we have moved ahead. And I think that needs to be understood. All this talk about no synergy in leadership, no synergy between military and all. We are doing what we have to do. We have got resources. What is the task of the military? To defend the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the country. So you're giving me the resources, I will defend that. Leave that to me. And when there's something less, I'll come back to you. So it's a discussion between the civilian leadership and the military leadership. So please never get this in your mind that there is no dialogue and there's friction because you read something on, or you see something on TV, somebody shouting and saying, hey, there's nothing, so and so, nothing of that sort. There is a system in place, we are working, we understand what it is. As an army commander, as a CMC here, he's got his orders clearly, what I'm supposed to do in war. I know it. Then you give me the resources, so I'll do it. And if I can't do it, I must say now and not embarrass my country. Simple. Are we doing it? I'm sure. I did it, the CMC is doing it today, and his successors will do it tomorrow. So there is no doubt in my mind about that. Rest assured, we will not let the country down. The armed forces are here. We will do our best for the country. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. And sir, once again, thank you very much for inviting me here. Thank you very much.